Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Mending Threads. Of course, it is morning now, and when you see the show, audience, it will be evening, 7 o'clock in the evening. But I want to welcome you to the show this morning. Welcome to Mending Threads. This is your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. And today we have a topic. We're going to look at who am I and mental health. And of course, we have on us today, and we've interviewed a gentleman who's with the Multicultural Ethnic Center for Immigrants, and we'll be using his information as we speak about mental health. And our guest this morning, who is our cultural expert and historian here in Houston, Texas, and it is, I call him Doc Walker, Oswald Walker, who's assistant associate professor, and he's also pastor at the Shrine. And so we're going to be able to look at what they call integrated care as we speak, as we look at mental health. So now there's a topic, and people are talking about the preponderance of statistics and number of people who are dying of the COVID, looking at the stress, the disproportionate number of persons who are experiencing stress, particularly Hispanics, African Americans. We want to just look at the situation. And we talked about the impact of stress on chronic disease, on whole body wellness. Now, when we look at this, we're having a high incidences of suicide, mutilation, self-mutilation during this particular period of time. Now, we want to begin to look at, because the research from the World Health Organization and the National Institute of Mental Health says that there's some and a high correlation between how a person describes themselves culturally and mental health statistics and how they fare in mental health. And we've defined mental health as a person's ability to recognize their well-being and to have a sense of well-being, to be able to function in their daily lives, to be able to earn a living, to be able to think and make decisions, and without a disproportionate amount of stress. So when we talk about different groups today, we're going to be looking at how the stress that one encounters impacts the status and evaluation of whether they have a mental health difficulty. Now, mental illness comes when there is something going on in the body that could be genetic, it could be chemical change that does not allow a person to function, that allows a person to fall into maybe a severe depression that clouds their judgment, where they have vacillation in moods, where they're not able to feel stable and not able to be stable, not able to function. So we want to begin to look at that. And so we're going to talk with Dr. Walker today to begin to see what he has discerned and studied that could impact who am I. So, Dr. Walker, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you doing, Dr. Lewis?
Just good, just good. Had a good week, and I'm doing this week-long study this week, and which is bringing on more information. So I'm doing a lot on trauma this week and studying that, and I'll be
Okay.
able to share some more of that with you. So
Excellent.
I wanted to, and I know that we may have some new viewers this morning. So I want to ask you a little bit about how have you studied and what brought you to this topic of looking at who am I, and in terms of a professor, in terms of a pastor. Can you
Okay.
share with us what brought you that so the audience can kind of get an idea of
Certainly.
your involvement? Hmm.
Certainly. So, my Master's of Divinity, my studies at a Candler School of Theology at Emory University, focused on the psychology and sociology of religion. Our faith, how does our culture impact our faith? How does our faith impact our culture? I focus most of my studies on Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his theology, but that's how I came upon this. And in those studies and in other studies, what I found interesting was the belief: man, know thyself. Man, woman, know thyself was foundational, or is foundational. It was foundational to the religious systems that came out of ancient Egypt, out of ancient Kemet. In fact, it said that the African mystery temples that are known as the world's really first universities, the the entrance had a sign above it. The entrance to the African mystery temples had a sign above it that said, "Man, know thyself," or "Man, woman, know thyself." That you can't do anything. You can't grow spiritually. You can't grow intellectually. You can't grow into being all that God created you to be if you are not comfortable with who you are, know your own history, heritage, and culture. If you don't, you're always going to be in stress, consciously or subconsciously, because you are not acting out of your very divine nature. So it was through my studies of African and African American history, through my studies of theology, that brought me to this place where um, I focus on and I do research on and I preach on and teach
Mm-hmm.
on the importance of knowing who you are, knowing your history, heritage, and culture, because that is like foundational to your mind, body, spirit, health. If you don't have that grounding, you're always going to be off. You're always going to be fighting yourself. There's always going to be a war inside of you. So that's where I came to this.
So in other words, in terms of child rearing, in terms of knowing thyself, we generally learn who we are earlier on as children, and I think that that teaching kind of just grows over the years. But it has something to do with what's going on in your community. You know, like what your community teaches you, what your family teaches you, and maybe even thirdly, not maybe but knowingly, that is connected to your grandparents, your ancestors. You know, your intergenerational connections will
It's
have a lot to do with yes.
it's all of that. And there's this saying, as I believe, so I do, and as I do, so I believe. In other words, what we believe, what we truly believe, shows in less in our words than in our actions. We can say anything with our mouth, but our
Mm-hmm.
actions will show what we truly, truly believe. And surely there are some folk who are watching this program who have either experienced this or know somebody who are in a quote unquote love relationship, and their partner says with their mouth, I love you, but with their actions, they show something totally different, right? So what you really believe shows by your actions. Now, what does that have to do with religion, with stress or a lack of stress? Well, how
Mm-hmm.
you believe about religious matters is one of the main drivers in how we act. And thus, it shows what we really believe. In other words, your theology, what you believe about God, humanity, salvation, and the role of the church, then
Mm-hmm.
dictates how you act and operate in the world. Your theology defines what is acceptable behavior to you and what is unacceptable behavior to you. And I give you a few examples. Republicans love to say that they believe in family, they believe in the institute of family, yet they are willing to rip children from the arms of their parents, throw them in cages, underfund the public education of our children. So they don't really believe in family. They love to say that they are pro-life, that they are against abortion, yet the data shows that these pro-life Republicans have just as many abortions as people who consider themselves pro-choice. But Republicans are willing to justify their own abortions, but will damn you to hell for doing the same thing. And also, they are for the death penalty. So I don't know how you can be pro-life and for the death penalty. They say that they I mean, I can give you a million other examples, but
Inconsistencies. Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say is you can say anything with your mouth, but your actions will really show what you believe. And so Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., his African name, Jeramogi Abebe Ajman, known as the father of Black liberation theology, influenced heavily by Marcus Garvey. He contends that Black people, enslaved Africans on the plantation, were given what he calls a slave theology, a theology or a way of believing about God, humanity, salvation, and the role of religion, um, meant to facilitate our continued enslavement. And he
Yes,
also
yes.
and he also contends that that same slave theology is still with us ingrained today. So when you were saying that what we are taught at our schools and in our and by our parents and all this and all that, we're really talking about the legacy of this slave theology, that we are born in sin, that we are filthy rags, that we are totally dependent on someone or some force outside of ourselves to save us and make us right with God, because on our own we're not worthy. And so
Yes.
what that does for us, it creates in us this childlike dependent behavior where we have little or no power to change our reality, where we are sitting back waiting on either Jesus or Superman or the government or some benevolent white person to come save us. And black folk, we can say all we want that we don't believe that, but the effectiveness of 400 years of a slave theology shows through our actions. For decades, we have rejected all movements towards self-determination. We argue. I mean, it's just been over the past couple of decades that Black people have opened up to the idea that Jesus and Mary and all the folk in the Bible were actually African Black people. That was a war in 1968. Reverend Albert B. Clegg in his
Yes.
church on 1967, excuse me, Easter Sunday, unveiled an 18-foot mural of a Black Madonna and child, and Black folk lost their minds, not white people. Black people lost their minds.
But it was
How
inconsistent because it was inconsistent
how
with what they had believed all
inconsistent with
along.
what
Yes.
they believe. How dare you defame Mary and Jesus like that, defame and defile them. And so all this causes this conscious and subconscious stress, because really what we're doing is fighting against ourselves, fighting against our
Mm-hmm.
nature, human nature, not just African people, human nature
Mm-hmm.
is for self-determination, is for agency, is to show the world what I have to offer, what I can do. It's not to be subservient, dependent, helpless and hopeless and pitiful and waiting on someone else to do for you what God gave you the power to do for yourself. And so when we have been taught, and taught might be the wrong word, um, but when we have been, I can't remember what the term is, um, to believe,
Oriented, indoctrinated, or orient.
indoctrinated, that's the word I'm looking for,
Mm-hmm.
indoctrinated into this
Mm-hmm.
belief system that we are helpless, that we are powerless. Um, that goes against the very nature of humanity that God created in all people, in all people, in all people. So we have all kinds of levels of stress that are
Mm-hmm.
operating within us because we are trying to we act and believe one way, but nature tells us something totally different. But even with that, the ancestors in that spirit, you could call it something inside so strong, you can call it a fire shut up in our bones, you can call it whatever you want to, but our
Mm-hmm.
true nature has always tried to fight back and tried to fight to get out, and it has gotten out in a few individuals and a few movements. these
Yes.
these, these African or ancestral influences, like our need for community. We were created for community. I need you, you need me, we need each other. We can do
Mm-hmm.
more together than we can apart. I am because we are, and because we are,
Mm-hmm.
therefore I am. So this need for community. Why do we always come together? Whether it's Friday and Saturday night, on Sunday morning, we're always together. Um, the 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 family reunions, the picnics, the fraternal and sorority. We're all,
Mm-hmm.
that's in
Mm-hmm.
us. It's
Is
not
it?
in us to be separate and apart. The need for ritual. Ritual is just a spiritual tool by Africans to bring order to chaos. You know, life is just chaotic, right? Chaotic, chaotic. We
Mm-hmm.
got it's
Anything like.
it,
Mm-hmm.
it, it's chaotic. African people created ritual so that we could have these moments where we slow down long enough to remember that with all the craziness of life, we are children of God, that we are connected to this God, and that we have a power to control our reality. To if we have problems, we've got the power to bring a solution to that problem. That's what rituals are all about. rituals. And some folk out there saying, well, we don't do any rituals. If you go to church, if you've been a part of a baptism, if you've gone to a wedding or a funeral, um, I can name a million rituals
Ritual. That's
that are
right.
part of our life. And
Hmm.
as a
Hmm.
people, rituals kept us grounded. It helped us to relieve the stresses of everyday life, the need for dynamic and active worship. Like when you go to a black church, you can't just sit there and be quiet. Because if you're quiet, the preacher's going to call you out. He's going to say, "Amen, lights and walls," or "Can I get an amen?" You know, he or she has got to hear from
Hmm.
you, right?
Hmm.
Because I need you, you need me, we need each other.
So
Also,
you
this
see, I want to just while you're saying that, so then that would mean that if that's a thread for our people, then what you're saying is then that thread needs to be consistent within the community, in the schools, and
yes,
whatever need to include this for the mental health of young people, for the
right.
mental health of the whole group. You see, so that is truly absent
One of
with. Hmm.
I mean, you're exactly. I love the way you said that, Doctor Lewis.
Hmm.
But you reminded me of something, right? It is said research shows that the average black child receives 200 negative messages every single day, whether it's from teachers that don't
Hmm.
believe in them, their own parents, whether it's from the images that they see on
Hmm.
TV.
Hmm.
200 negative messages about what you are not as a
Hmm.
black child, as a black person, every single day. Research also says that for that negative messages are more impactful on us than positive. For every one negative message you receive, you have to receive 5 positive messages just to balance it out. And
Yeah.
and so what I'm saying is, um, even if you have one person in your life that is trying to reconnect you with all that you are and all that God created you to be, you've got all these other negative messages coming at you. So
Yes.
what you said
Yes.
is just so profound. You said we've got to have it in our faith institutions, we've got to have
Yes.
it at church, we've got to have it
Yes.
in our homes, we've got to have it wherever it goes, things that are positive
Hmm.
and reminding us of our agency, of the power that we have within our hands to change our futures, to chart our own course and to fight against this madness that tries to convince us that we are less than somebody else.
Naim Akbar and
Yeah.
Alfred Pasteur. Alfred Pasteur went to Alfred Tolson, and Pasteur went to Africa, and they compared some things in terms of music, and they found that the music that you have and that you teach your children would tend to, in the appreciation of the music, to know where
Mm,
it came from and what the beats will do, has something to do with the mental health. So they came back, they studied it all over after they looked at the tempo, and they looked at how you mentioned something about the connection, and they mentioned how they did the rituals with the music when there was different trauma or circumstances, be it a flood or this or that, and how all of that was helping them to cope with it because they had meaning attached to that to help them survive. And they would always bring on the ancestors, bring the music as if they were fortifying themselves. So when
right.
they came back to America to bring the information and to utilize it within the schools and everything. And they found that they were not able to link it as quickly or use it because there were thoughts and teachings that were they call it antithetical to healing,
Mm,
because the people wouldn't allow the connection of ancestors within the school, and they wanted the music to be a separate foundation, and so therefore it was not healing. So that when you mentioned that, that was something that came to mind that I had read, that it's important to bring connection to the information as to how it's used. You
yeah.
see, and the timing of it. That's what they were saying. The timing of it to put it into the ritual, make it a ritual on a
Yeah.
certain time. Yes.
In fact, Malcolm Somé, uh, who has degrees from all the bigwig institutions, but he's also um, a griot and a shaman from Burkina Faso. Um, he wrote one of my favorite books of Water and the Spirit, but he also wrote another one entitled The Healing Wisdom of Africa, where he focuses on the importance of ritual and the importance of us having a
Mhm.
relationship with our ancestors. Because it's funny how much of our Africanness is still in us. I'll never forget the movie Coolie High when the brothers are on the corner and they're about to drink, and before they drink, they pour a little out for the brothers and sisters who aren't here anymore. That is
Yes,
literally the ritual of libation. That's what African
yes.
people have always done, recognizing that even though folk are dead, they're not here in the land of the living, that their
Hmm.
energy and spirit is still with us as long as we remember them, and that they are a critical part of our community. And Malidoma Somé and other Dr. Jawanza Eric Clark and others argue that we as a people will never be fully healthy until we recognize that relationship, until we cultivate that relationship as much as we cultivate any other relationship in our life, a relationship with our ancestors. We're not worshiping our ancestors, we're venerating and recognizing and honoring them.
So
But
let me because I know the audience is like, what does this have to do with a lot of the mental health problems that we have? Let me give you an example and then go back. I want to relate it to what you're saying. So I'm working with a young person and who has, for example, difficulty making decisions. So
mhm,
she runs around, she asks different people, what do they think? What do you think? And so being in a relationship, that's kind of a little problem. So therefore, she's confused all the time as to whether she's having the right thing or she's doing the right thing. And so one of the things is that there are different ways that you would treat this person. So one of the things is that you could teach her how to make decisions.
yeah,
Or you could, and how to make the process of making decisions. Or you could realize that she has nothing to hang on to, that she has no beliefs that are consistent for herself, that she can use the process. So if you start at the process, then she will go through the process, and as soon as there is a big interruption or there's a trauma, she will then vacillate, and she will start to cycle all over again, even though she knows the technique, because the trauma would throw her system off balance and she will have nothing as a foundation to hang on. So this then impacts a therapist as to how a therapist would use as to what a therapist thinks and believes in terms of mental health. That's the difference between the training of the typical therapist and those who really understand the impact of culture, mental health, and just knowing thyself. And so, therefore, the different treatment would be to help that individual while they are learning the techniques to understand the importance in their family, what family things they appreciate, where did it come from, who are you to study something, to know something about where your thoughts and ideas, the ones you have, what do you value, some things you value in yourself, all of those things link to that. So I just wanted the audience to see that these are some techniques that they would use for themselves when they're there, to go back and study what you're speaking about as to how that would actually ground them in their frustration and stress.
Dr.
Mm.
Lewis, I'm a big believer in the power of learning from fiction, the power of learning from movies, TV, from poetry,
Mm-hmm.
from all these things. And everything you just said, I saw last night when I was watching an episode of Ratchet, which is the new big show on Netflix. This
Well, I
one
got
sister,
you.
oh, you got to check it out. This one sister is suffering from multiple personality disorder. She doesn't know who she is because of a trauma that she endured in her life. Her trauma um, facilitated her being disconnected from her true self. And
Mm,
so the episode is partly, at least partly, about this doctor trying to get her once again grounded in who she is. And once he's able to do that, once she's grounded in who she is, all her stresses. I mean, it's not that all her stresses are gone, but she's now able to deal with
yeah.
them in a healthy way. That's just part of, I mean, this is fiction. That's just part of the story. It
Yes,
goes way, way
yes.
deeper. But when you were saying that, I was like, man, I just saw that last night. I
Oh
just
well,
saw that last
I'm gonna look at that. Matter of fact, I'm gonna even have some of my patients to look at that.
That was, I think that was episode 5, focused on the party, and it's going to take you all kinds of other places. So I don't know if you're going to be able to handle it, but it was a perfect example of what you just said about how we can get, for lack of a better term, throwed off if we don't
Mm-hmm.
know who we are. And just to get back to what I was saying about the Africanness that's in us, always trying to get out.
Mm-hmm.
One of those cultural uh, internal values we have is a seeking attitude, an attitude of seeking. In other words, I can't just read about how God worked in someone else's life. I got to experience God working in my life personally. So for me, it's not just about what I can read in the Quran or in the Bible or in any other book, the Husia. Um, it's what I experience personally, my personal connection and relationship with my God. And this seeking attitude is also shown in our people in a thirst for knowing who we are, our history. You have a lot of young people, a lot of older people too, who do the work of uncovering our history because we've been lied to for so long about the fact that we have no history. So that seeking attitude comes out in Black people saying, wait a minute, let's go back and read Chikantha Diop. Let's go back and read Dr. John Henry Clark and Ivan Van Sertima and all Dr. Ben and all the greats and learn what we haven't been taught in our history classes from K through 12. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem is a lot of millennials are rejecting, and I can only speak to the Black church because as a Christian, that's where I am. A lot of millennial Black folk are rejecting the Black church because, and this is a generalization, but many Black churches refuse to incorporate that history and the
Mm-hmm.
geography and
Mm-hmm.
even current issues and struggles into the program of the church. And young folk are saying, well, if you're not doing that, you don't have that seeking attitude. You're not helping me to connect with who I am really.
Mm-hmm.
But those churches that are and those movements that are aren't afraid to recognize that Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all trace their roots back to ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, in the system of Ma'at, the 7 principles of Ma'at. The fact that out of ancient Egypt, monotheism, the first virgin birth story, the 42 negative confessions that hundreds and hundreds of years later became the 10 commandments, the first resurrected savior story, all that comes
Mm-hmm.
out of ancient Egypt hundreds of years before it it became integrated into the Christian story. But if you are so fragile in your Christian faith, you won't be willing to wrestle with that new information that's really ancient and old.
Mm-hmm.
And you will kick back those young folk who are saying, if you aren't willing to wrestle with this truth, what are you going to do for my spirit? And
Yes.
then the whole
They
African
begin to
origins.
question, then they begin to question, negatively question, instead of seeking the good what's in there, they begin to doubt.
Oh, they
Mm-hmm.
begin to doubt. And there's also this huge movement of millennials and generation, I think it's Z.
X. Oh,
Well, Generation Z, I'm Generation X.
yes. Oh,
The
that's right. Yeah.
Generation Z, rejecting uh, Christianity and Islam and running back to traditional African faiths like Ifa and Candomblé and others because they're like, y'all aren't even willing to connect with our own history, much less just general history. So how are you going to help me as a child of Africa, as a child of the Pan African world
Mm-hmm.
community, when you're not even willing to address our history, when you're not willing to wrestle with the African origins of Christianity, because the geography says that the Christians, 90% of the Christian story took place
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
Africa. The chronological history, 2000 BC, the founding of the nation Israel and Abraham, 1200 BC, when the children of Israel were supposed to have gone into Egypt. Hell, it was 800, 900 years later before whites, Alexander the Greek, came into Africa as conquerors. So most of the Bible story was already written before there were any whites in that part of the world. Biblical witness. Abraham was from Ur of Chaldea. Look at the ancient Chaldeans. They look like me and you, Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
Moses mistaken as an Egyptian twice. Mary and Joseph taking their son Jesus to hide from the authorities. They go hide out in Egypt in a place where they can blend in, not stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cultural witness, like, the
Mm.
whole story of Cain and Abel, right? Cain was supposed to have killed his brother Abel. God says, yo, Cain, where's your brother? And Cain answers God, am I my brother's keeper? And the answer, of course, is yes. And then God punishes Cain. God doesn't kill Cain. He sends him away from his people. And Cain's response is the most African thing I've ever heard in my life. Cain says, man, I wish you would have killed me. This
Mhm.
punishment is worse than death, because for African people, the most important thing is our connection to one another. If we
Yes.
don't have community from the African perspective, we don't have anything at all. And also throughout the
Mm.
Bible, there's ancestral veneration. And I'm not even bringing up the scriptures that talk about the Messiah having skin like burnt brass and hair
Yes.
like lamb's wool. But you know, young folk who are open to our history and heritage and culture, they don't want to be a part of a faith system that's not going to celebrate that, because to
Mm.
them, that's just bringing them more stress. And they're trying to figure out, how can I relieve stress so that I can live and
Mm-hmm.
be my best self?
Mm-hmm. And this is so important. Now we're really talking about mental health. I did an
Right.
article some years ago about mental health in the church. And one of the things is that it does offer, the church offers the teaching, the rituals in the church. What I did was I found out that people who were actively involved in that ritual of going to church and studying and whatever had lower mental health, less mental health problems, as you screen, and they had a higher index on a sense of well-being. So now, what would you think if we would infuse it and look at all of the history and put that information in there? What would really happen with the larger numbers increase in terms of wellness, ill, and what we would do is get rid of the stigmas around mental health and mental illness, because they would see that then mental illness is their response to misguided or misinformation or the environment. Because the World Health Organization showed that the stigma was the stigma that we have about ourselves and mental health, and increasing it has a lot to do with how other people interpret us as an individual and our response to it. So if you could see how, and you see the connection between it all. Now, my question is this: then, from your experience, what keeps us from doing it? If we have a people in our community who are such as yourself, knowledgeable. We have other people who are knowledgeable. If we look around us as individuals and we see that when we do this, when the billboards are all up there, it's telling you, well, I'll just let me back up. So when you see the billboards, when you see the TV commercials, when you see all of the well people don't really look like you. All of
Right.
the people who are moved, they don't look like you. But if we know that we are able to survive, and we know you can look around you and see that we're still able to do a lot of things. If you then know and you go to church and you then study this, what keeps us from expressing this and explaining it and discussing it as we connect to a place where we engage in rituals and we're discussing it for the healing of the spirit?
You asked $1 million question, and
I
Reverend
really,
Albert B. Clegg, Reverend Albert B. Clegg argued that um, during the 60s, when a whole lot of young folk were rejecting the black church, calling it an Uncle Tom institution and all that, he was like, I understand what you're saying. I'm with you. However, um, the black church is the only institution we own and control. And if we can ever save the black church and restore it to
yes.
its original uh, teachings, to its orthodoxy, it can be the most powerful. But to answer your question, what stops us? Reverend Cleage would answer niggerization. Dr. Naeem Akbar would say internalized depression. Dr. Joy Leary de Jour would say post traumatic slavery syndrome. and they're all really talking about the same thing. They're talking about the operant conditioning, the ongoing impact of hundreds of years of being taught that we are less than. And people want to say that that doesn't still impact us. And there's even studies that show that all the negativity of enslavement is passed down in our DNA. It's literally in our DNA. Some
Mm-hmm.
folks uh, don't say that all that's in the past, but it only takes research has shown it only takes 21 days of powerlessness for it to impact your mind, your body, and your spirit. So if you are enslaved, if you are kidnapped, if you are thrown behind bars, it only takes 21 days for
That's right.
that to begin to negatively impact how you see yourself, how you see the world,
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
those things. So imagine then being in enslaved not just for 21 days, not just for 21 months or 21 years, but for 250 plus years. And then even in our freedom, still being taught that we are less than and enslaved by the convict leasing system, enslaved by sharecropping, enslaved by institutional racism. So all that is teaching us on a daily basis. And still to this very day, we have negative messages that we're receiving. So we're constantly being niggerized or constantly having to deal with internalized depression. So answering your question, that's what is blocking us. It's been placed inside of us, and we are at war with ourselves. This niggerization is inside of us, but
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm.
inside of us is our divine spirit that's trying to fight back. But we've
Yes.
got to give it something to work with. Like you were
Yes.
saying, you can find it if you are blessed enough to meet a Dr. Willie Lewis or Dr. Naeem Akbar, Dr. George DeJour, or someone, or Deloyd Parker from Shape Community
Yes.
Center,
Yes.
or
Yes.
somebody Omawale Luthuli, someone that recognizes our Africanness and our beauty. Robert Muhammad with the nation. There's so many people, so many lights. Kofi Taharka with
Mm-hmm.
Mbuck. There's so many beautiful souls out there that will help facilitate us reconnecting. But Dr. Reverend Albert B. Clegg, he argued that if niggerization is the problem, if we were taught to hate ourselves, taught not to love ourselves, if there was a system we've got to find that creates a negative slave culture, then we've got to be able to build a counter culture. There's got to be a counter
Yes.
system. There's got to be a
Yes.
system. It can't just be you read one or two books and think
No.
everything's going to be cool. It
Mm-hmm.
can't just be that you meet one or two people that are positive and everything's going to be all right. It has to be a total system. You said this earlier in this broadcast. You
Mm-hmm.
got to have the positive messages in the home, in the
In the
faith
school.
institution. It's got
Mm-hmm.
to be an entire system that
Mm-hmm.
helps us move out of this niggerization and internalized depression and into a place where we are healthy and whole and living our best lives, being our best full selves, what God created us to be, and not the things that this world has sought to limit us to be.
And I'm trying to think of my friend at Temple University in Africa.
Dr. Malefi Asante.
Yeah, Malefia Sante. He told
Mm-hmm.
me one time, he says, see, here's the deal. He says, one of the things is that you need the system. He said, but each person has to feel the spirit within them to
Mm-hmm.
take the step out to do something that the others are not doing or that they are doing. And you must connect to the other people who are doing in order to confirm the system, the counterculture.
Yeah.
And in other words, this is what we're not doing. So, I know I'm going to have a hard thing of it in my
Right.
old age.
Right.
But as I told him, I wish I could be over there with you in South Africa. He's doing this school thing. I said, but I'm going to try to do this thing. This is my last thing that I'm really trying to do while I have the energy to do this
Mm.
is to have the spirit that I have that knows the light that's giving me to move in that direction. And he's saying if you could foster that in other people and actually move in a concerted way to connect those three things, the home, the school, and the church, and the community centers the community, you will have done what it is that you have been asked to do. And he says, because the teaching of the African spirit is that it is already in you and that God has given it to you. It is the energy and force that He has given it. So if you're going to share your energy, you have to then recognize the strength of sharing your energy and do it with all the force that you have.
So
But
in my church, the Shrine of the Black Madonna, we call that KUA, KUA,
mhm,
the science of becoming what you already are. So what we're trying to
mhm,
do, we're not trying to become anything else. We're just trying to become what God already created us, and
to
then
be.
find
Mhm.
what created us to be. And I'll say this: the irony is that the even with slave theology, the church gave us something that's critically important. It gave us hope, because without
Yes.
hope, you're even though you may be alive, you're literally the walking dead. The problem is we placed our hope in heaven after we die. We placed our hope in some outside force. If we could connect with our history, heritage, and culture and recognize that God wants us to have hope in the God inside of us, oh my gosh, we no weapon formed against us could prosper.
Now,
Literally.
I can't remember, I never could remember exact scripture, but I do remember one scripture that says that I am inside of you, and the light for me will be from hereafter, speaks of the heaven that you're going to, because once you have me inside of you, and you know that I'm inside of you, and you live me inside of you, then you have ascended, you see.
Yeah. And then Jesus told his followers, um, after this guy brought his child to the disciples and they couldn't heal, then he brings the child to Jesus and Jesus heals the child, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
Jesus runs to his disciples and cusses them out. Um, he says, "How much longer must I be with you?" If you had faith just the size of a mustard seed, or for black folk today, the size of some mustard greens, you could tell the mountain to jump into the sea, and it would. But he said these words that for the life of me, I can't figure out why these aren't preached every week in the black church. Jesus tells his disciples, "What I can do, you can do, and even greater things shall you do." So Jesus was saying, you've got to recognize your own power, your own agency, the fact that God is inside of you. I guess I do know why that has been preached every week, because with the slave theology, that's not the message that folk want us to receive. That we have power, we have
Mm-hmm.
agency, we've got the ability to handle our own business, and that's when God is really going to start blessing us.
Yes. So, we really talking about. So, I do remember that Brother Abdi at the Multi Ethnic Center, he works with international persons and immigrants,
Hmm.
and we'll be partnering with him,
Hmm.
and to look at how we could help them understand and how we bridge our knowledge of Africa, since many of
Hmm.
them come from different places and from Africa. And so they'll have a lot to teach us about that, and we'll have a lot
Hmm.
to teach them about this. And I think it's going to enrich us and strengthen the foundation of us moving forward. So
Can't
I
wait.
want to say what.
I said, can't wait.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I mean, I'm telling you. So, one of the things is that I want to thank you this morning, because you just have such a wealth of knowledge. And I know the community is going to have an opportunity to really engage in this understanding and the richness of it from a real point of view, from reality. So it's not anything fictitious. It's something about how you live daily life. And I'm going to look at this movie, A Ratchet. I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see.
It's a
I'm gonna
TV
see if I
series.
can look at that. And I'm sure it's illegal to uh 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 maybe maybe they'll allow me to get segments for teaching. So I would really
Oh
like
yeah, I
to
hear you.
have segments of it, you see, and I got to figure out how to do that so I can do that. And I'll follow up and let you know what happens with the young lady, because I'm really working on this um cultural intervention with her for her healing, because she's truly in some situation here of
Yeah.
not knowing and not being able to find her way. And so we're going to look at that and kind of follow it to see where we are. And I'm going to share some information. I'm going to have her to listen to what we've talked about this morning as well. Okay, then I want to thank you for being a guest on Mending Threads, and I'm going to tell you our theme, and it relates to what we're talking. It's renew beliefs, rebuild faith, and reconnect families and communities. That's
All
our
right.
organizational theme, and it has been since 1980 something. And we're with the Women's Resource Center, the Imani Faith Health Initiative here in Houston, but we're working with other different groups and universities like Texas Southern, University of Houston, Temple University, and some others um, around the country. So, Light University as well. So I want to say thank you for being with us on the topic of who am I? And remember this, audience, it's not the circumstances we meet, it is the manner in which we respond that determines health, happiness, and success. And make sure that you register for the mental health coaching. You can be anywhere and register. You can call 281-381-2276. You can email ips.health1@gmail.com. You can go to our website, wrc-houston.com. Some kind of way you can mail us at 2626 South Loop West, Suite 430, Houston, Texas, 77054. Now, I'm saying all that to say this is our stepping out to heal the communities and to look at pastors and organizations who are faith based, community led, organizations to come together to lock arms and bring about a whole body wellness in the community. So please don't wait. WAIT, do not wait. No wait. Okay. Please step up. Please call. Go somewhere and sign up. You can call Doc Walker at Texas Southern University at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. He'll tell you where to go and what to do as well. Okay, then, and I'm going to look forward to us being together on next Tuesday, and we'll have Doc Walker back, and we're going to be talking with Harris Health Center about how
Mhm.
they handle the situation within the county. Okay, and looking at cultural needs and how we handle stress and mental health. Okay, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week. Bye bye.
All right.
Bye bye.